Hello English learners, this is Learn English with Brandon, and in this video I would like to give you some tips on how to start thinking in English and why you should not translate in your mind from your first language. So when we first start learning a language, in some cases it is necessary to translate to help us get started with various phrases, various vocabulary. And this is okay in the beginning, but by the beginning I mean, the first 8 hours of intensive course, 8 hours of intensive coursework. And what I do to think in certain languages is I keep a dictionary handy, that does translate for things that I need to look up really quick. A dictionary that has a descriptive definition along with prescriptive. Prescriptive is the technical definition, and descriptive gives us examples of what it means. This is really important to help learning how to read and help learning, yes, how to think in English. So what I do is, as I take what I'm learning with me everywhere I go, and I observe the world around me. And as I observe the world around me, I take things that I see and I think about them in the language that I'm learning. So if there's something that I don't know, then I look that up, how to say that in that language, and then I immediately attach the image with the word, the new word that I'm learning. And then I try to apply it as quickly as I can. Once we can have an image attached to an action, a physical action such as vocalizing something, and then we can use it in context, this reinforces our memory on how to use whatever it is we're trying to learn in a language, and how to memorize that permanently and how to learn it appropriately. I like to say when we bounce this off people in the external world, we have the opportunity to be corrected. Yes, we have the opportunity to make a mistake, but I personally think it's a great thing to make mistakes, because if we don't catch ourselves making mistakes, then we're probably not improving. So looking around and thinking as we see things in the language that we're trying to learn is crucial. But not only seeing things, we want to look into ourselves, and we call this introspection in English, and we want to look in ourselves, and we want to try to describe these feelings and these emotions in the language that we are trying to learn. So these are two ways of internalizing the language and learning how to think in the language, okay? We can do this outwardly in our mind as well as inwardly in our mind as well. And we need to do both. We need to do both because we communicate things from within towards the other person, and we communicate things that we've experienced in the external world with other people as well. Now, there's something that is really important to avoid quickly, and that's, as I mentioned, translating. Okay, the reason why we often get lost in translation coming to English is because English, is a hybrid language. Depending on who you ask, these figures that I'm about to give you will vary. But English is, you could say, roughly 30% German, 30% French, and 30% Latin. That leaves us with 10%. I've read that roughly maybe 4% of English words are made from names, such as Randy, Brady, what else might there be? Randy, Brady, I mean, there's many more, of course. Randy is being sexually aroused. Brady means slow, such as bradycardia, having a slow heartbeat. But there are many other ones. 2% Greek, roughly, and maybe a little bit of Arabic. Algebra is an Arabic word. So we want to keep in mind that when we have a language that's composed of three relatively different languages, such as German and the Romance languages, that this can be a little bit confusing. Now, conversationally, we'd use German syntax. If we talk about the genetic ancestry of the English language, it it encompasses German syntax. It goes back to the German language. So this is why some people will say, no, English is a Germanic language. And in many ways, you can argue this to be the truth. In conversational English, we often use Germanic syntax. And if you look at many different languages that have a German background, such as German, such as Swedish, Danish, Norwegian. For instance, if you take in Swedish, you'll hear this phrase at the market, "Are de solda?" "Are de solda?" And this is Swedish for "are they sold?" Right? It's very similar. If you read English very well, in many cases you could probably read Swedish and understand it. Okay? Now, when we step away from conversation and we go to giving speeches or literature, this is when we get more towards the romantic side of language, which is why Spanish speakers, French speakers, any speakers from any Romance language can find it easy to read and write, but they find it difficult to speak. And this is why, on the other hand, people that speak languages from a Germanic background find it very easy to communicate. Not only is the syntax very similar, but what's required phonetically is also very similar, which is why in Europe we often look at Germans, Swedish, Norwegians, Danish as people who can speak English very well. They can speak their own language very well. And once you've learned two languages really well, it often becomes easy for them to learn their third or fourth language really well, which is why many German speakers or German citizens, Norwegian citizens can speak more than two languages. But keep that in mind if you're coming from a Romance language or from another language with another type of syntax, because they have an advantage when learning English, okay? But this is why we do not want to translate. If you come from a Turkish background, for example, when you ask for something, say you're saying, "iki çay istiyorum," right? "İki çay istiyorum," right? You're asking for tea, but the syntax is backwards when we compare it to English, because we wouldn't say in English, "two teas I want," but in Turkish this is how it would translate. So we don't want to translate. We want to hear the phrase, "I would like two teas, please," or "please may I have two teas," and we want to associate that phrase with the action, and we want to disconnect this English phrase with the Turkish phrase or with any other phrase that we have in our first language. This will help us break that gap of translating in our minds so that we can learn directly what the experience is in that language, and so that we can quickly start thinking in that language. I hope you found these tips helpful. Please ask any questions in the comments below. I really appreciate the time you've taken to watch this video, so please subscribe to see the other videos, and you can help me become a better teacher by telling me what's difficult for you so that I can meet your needs. Thanks again.